This episode of the Prediction Trade asks two expert horse race handicappers to name their five best bets for the Kentucky Derby. Three horses end up on both experts' lists, so saddle up for a primer on betting big races as Jo Rosen and Noel Michaels pick winners in this year's Run for the Roses.
All you false pretenders and your freaky contenders trying to be the first. In my own opinion, you am not defending. You are the worst.
Welcome back to the Prediction Trade, where if you can trade it or bet on it, you can bet that we'll talk about it. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, and I'm joined by Mike Reddy, an editor at Luckbox and the producer of the Prediction Trade. Mike, I see that our last guest seemed to move the markets in Canada.
That's right, Jeff. Well, it was a very low volume market, so it wouldn't have to take much to move them. But, that's not to downplay how big a move we did see. When we had Tasha Keratin on the show to talk about that Canadian market, the yes shares for whether or not there would be a national parliamentary election were trading for 47 cents. That is no longer an even money trade. Today, there's been over a 10-cent gain in that market. Yes shares trading around 59 cents.
It looked as though the market responded directly to the release of the podcast. That market was pretty quiet, and the day we released the podcast, those yes shares went from 47 to about 59 cents, that 10 to 11, 12 cent move directly as a result of Tasha Keratin's call that her 100% certainty expecting a federal election in 2021 in Canada. So we'll be watching that carefully. I know I hopped on board and you said you did as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's we're just going to ride it out and see what happens. And speaking of riding, Jeff, I think today we're moving out of politics entirely and over to horses, aren't we? Racing at the Kentucky Derby.
That's right, Mike. We're going to the Kentucky Derby. So we've both been looking forward to this. So let's do it. Please introduce today's guests.
We have two guests appearing on the show today. Joining us is Noel Michaels. Noel is a racing analyst, editor, handicapper, and a contributor for usracing.com. He's often regarded as the leading source of news and information for handicapping tournaments, and is the author of Handicapping Contest Handbook, a horse player's guide to handicapping tournaments. Noel's analysis can be heard as part of the Arlington Park broadcasting team. Also joining us today is Jo Rosen. Jo has over 19 years' experience as a racing expert for media outlets such as Fox Sports Radio, NBC TV, ESPN Radio, and SiriusXM. In addition to being an expert commentator, she also has experience as a clocker, owner, breeder, and handicapper. Her expertise is rooted in an over 30-year background around horses. She hosts the Beyond the Racetrack podcast on the Believe Network.
Well, I believe first up is Molly Jo. So, Molly Jo, are you with us?
I am.
Well, welcome. We feel like we know you already, having spent some time chatting with you before this show. So you've been at this for a while. You know, it's a shame when everyone is defined by their years doing something, but it sounds like a career that you're very, very proud of. You've been around horses a long, long time, right?
I have. I am very lucky. My great-grandfather was a professional gambler, ran Rum Across the Border with Bugsy Siegel, and they worked out of Belmont Park and then Santa Anita when they all came west. My mom wanted me to love the sport more than the horse beach we went to every single weekend when I was a kid. And so at 18 months old, she put me on the back of a horse, and I show jumped till my teenage years, and then realized I was never going to make the Olympics, even though a lot of the folks that I grew up riding with did and are still on the U.S. and international Olympic teams. And I realized on my 15th birthday, walking up to the paddock at Del Mar, like I had every single year, but for some reason on my 15th birthday, it clicked that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I am very lucky that short of a couple of stints where I tried to get out of the game, it's pulled me back in every single time. And there really is no better way to wake up every day than knowing you're going to get to watch horses run in circles.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I bet you this week, this run up to the Kentucky Derby is a week that you look forward to every year.
It really is. There is nothing like the excitement of any race day, but certainly a big race day, and we are lucky, in horse racing and North American thoroughbred racing, we run, every day, 364 days a year. We have, on average, over 100 races a day, pre-COVID numbers, but they're pretty much back to normal now. But when it comes to the big days, your Kentucky Derbies, your Preaknesses, your Belmont Stakes days, couple throughout the year as well. I give a lot of tracks credit. Arlington Million Day, certainly with Noel coming up, I know that day is amazing. Breeders' Cup. I mean, we are spoiled with amazing races and horses and athletic performances. And there is nothing like the excitement of, especially a derby, because there are just certain things about it that are unlike any other race, especially the field size. There's no other race beyond 14 horses and the derby will be 20. Derby is carded at 20. There's just really nothing, there's nothing like it. And the crowd and the noise and the people it's just the spectacle of it just makes it's the best.
Well, I have to admit, I'm really excited about this episode because I'm a longtime fan of horse racing. I've gambled on most professional sports, and I'd say probably the most on football, then baseball second, but horse racing would be third. But when I look at those three sports, I can honestly make the assessment that the one I'm most confident in my outcome has been horse racing. Football, the way the algorithms work and the way the lines are set, it's a 50-50 proposition for the most part. I certainly haven't cracked that code. And baseball is far more interesting because there's more elements in play. It's not just the team, but it's the pitcher. So you have this jockey horse, racetrack conditions, recent workout. You have more factors in play with baseball than when football, where it's really a head-to-head competition, and the pitcher is a big variation. And the pitchers and the momentum or streaks of a team in baseball are really important betting factors. But the interesting thing in my personal experience about horse racing is I've had the most success. I'm confident when I go to the track, I'm going to come back a winner. It's an odd thing to say, but the interesting thing, admittedly, is I have no idea why. I know what I'm looking at. I don't believe I have any system. I look at the form very, very closely, and I look at everything from trainers to workout times to track conditions and where they are in class and injuries and everything, but I don't feel that I have a knack for it. So I'm really excited about trying to understand, you know not only are we trying to in our podcast, we're always putting anything you can bet on or anything you can trade in front of our audience. So this opportunity to talk about horse racing to me is very special. I'm looking forward to learning from both of you. And that's where we thought we would begin. You mentioned big race days. And of course, we're going to have Noel come on shortly, and he's going to walk through the field a little bit. But we were hoping that you could take us to school on how to bet a big race day and really get into the mechanics of what you should look for, what type of bets you should consider placing, how to manage your money, and big race day betting. Because as most people now, there was $165 million bet in 2019 on the Kentucky Derby. Last year in 2020, there were only 15 horses, as of course and then there was no on-site gambling because of COVID. So that fell in practically in half. That number cut down to about 79 million. I would expect that this is going to be perhaps a new record. I would think there's going to be a lot more interest in this derby and more money being spent. But I think for the most part, so much of that money is first time or once a year gamblers who bet on the derby because of the event that it is. So betting a big race day is probably how the majority of the individuals who bet the Kentucky Derby are treating it without a lot of background. So that's our job here, is to teach people what they should be looking at when they're making wagers or making investments or trades. And we're going to pass it on to you. So let's kick it off. How do you bet a race day?
I love that question so much. And one of the smartest handicappers, one of the smartest horse owners I've ever worked for, actually was a hedge fund guy. And Jeff Puglisi, who I had the pleasure of working for 2 years, explained it as he loved to bet horses the same way that he loved to trade, and there is a lot of overlap. And you have to trust the information, you have to trust your gut. And I love knowing, I love hearing that when you walk up to a track or go to make your bet online, that you feel like you're going to come away a winner, even though you may not know the animal or the athlete as much as sometimes a pitcher, et cetera, a football player. The thing that gets me in trouble every time I do seminars is when I remind people that the fun of horse racing is I could sit here and tell you, every horse in this field's brothers, cousins, uncle, what they did on the track, why the jockey stats matter, what the trainer is doing, why certain workout is. I could go through and totally geek out, and I gladly will. And I know that Noel and I are going to off air after this because that's just what we people do. And you can walk up to it or open the form, or someone's going to turn on their TV and go, "Ooh, soup and sandwich is a silly name," or "Helium is a little smaller. He's so cute." Or, we don't have anybody in this field with a name so much this year, but a couple of years ago there was a horse named Free Drop Billy, and for Dale Romans. And I remember I walked by I was sitting at a bar watching races, and somebody was handicapping, and they said, somebody new was looking at something. It was like, "My cousin's named Billy. I'm going to bet Billy." And it doesn't matter why you like a horse. It doesn't matter if all that matters is that you make a wager. And it doesn't matter if that wager is a beer with your buddy or a hot dog with your buddy, or if you put money through the window. Please put money through the window. The industry needs it. But the point is that you get a little skin in the game. You have a reason that you like a horse. And as somebody who's in this day in and day out, I could tell you why I like horses, but it is a puzzle. It is the best puzzle. It is the most fun. It is for people who don't do this every day, that are going to be looking at the racing form for the first time, or that only look at it once a year. There is no wrong way to read the form, which a lot of handicappers will tell you is not the case. For me, ask all of the questions. I will say this 100 times. I am on Twitter. It is all of my names. There is no stupid question. Ask anything. I very much want people to know that it looks daunting. The past performances are not pretty. They are a little scary. They're not as easy as a box score to look at, but ask. The only way you're going to know it is to ask. And one last piece is, if a horse looks good in the paddock or on the track, it doesn't matter why you think the horse looks good or is going to run well. Trust your gut. You know what it looks like when an athlete is going to do something good. You know what it is when Tom Brady runs the Patriots out of the Bucks out of the tunnel. You know what that's supposed to look like. It's the same thing with horses.
Well, one of the things that's so fascinating about horse racing, and in fact, just to back up a moment, a couple episodes back, we had Paul Krishnamurti on. He's a UK-based professional gambler, and golf and snooker and cricket are his main sports for gambling. And he conducted a master class on betting the Masters tournament, the golf tournament. And what stood out for us was, as first time golf gamblers, is the odds. So many long odds involved, and the long odds create a lot of interesting optionality for investors or traders. And we're students of probability. That's what our magazine Luckbox is all based upon. So unlike football, which is a binary outcome and a one-to-one bet, what makes horse racing more interesting, like golf, is the variation of odds and the paramutual betting format, because you can bet multiple horses, you can bet 5 or 6 different bets on one race, and win one and lose 4 and still come out ahead. So that creates so much more options, and so much makes it all so much more interesting. So let's start with that. Let's talk about money management for a little bit. Generally speaking, what do you advise gamblers about how much of their bets should be win, place, or show, or across the board bets, as opposed to the exacta, quinella, trifecta bets?
For me, with new fans or folks that maybe not as confident in uh, what they're doing, for to put it mildly, stick with across the board bets. I've been doing this literally my entire life. I have been wagering legally since I was 18 years old. Maybe a little bit before that, not gonna lie. But for me, my favorite wager and the one that I make most often, still to this day, is a $5 across the board bet. Costs me 15 bucks, win, place, and show. Horse just has to run third or better. And it feels like a little bit of a cop out, and enough professional handicappers that I have played with and worked with and done tournaments with, etc., have told me it's a cop out. But for me, I just wanna know that I'm right. And as much as, yeah, I wanna make money because that's the goal of betting, um, I wanna know that my gut instinct about a horse was right. And, then again, my favorite bet that I've ever made was I played a pick 4 where you have to pick 4 winners of 4 consecutive races in a row, and I went, it was a $36 ticket where I went a couple horses deep in the first 3 legs, and I singled, greatest play of my life, a Carlos Martin first-time starter named Sports Writer. This was a million years ago, 2011, 2012, and, I will never forget that. But, and I take shots, and I'm happy to take shots, but for me, the 2 best bets that somebody new to the sport can make are a win, play, show, or across the board. If you're playing online through an ADW, an account wagering company, it'll be WPS. On most of them, you can find it under the win button, typically is how you get to it. Um, Remember that whatever your base bet is, you're technically making 3 separate wagers. So if you're making a $2 across the board win, play, show bet, it's going to cost you 6. As I said, my favorite is $5 across the board, so that's 15. That is your safest bet. The one when you start to play your exotics where you have to use multiple horses, for me, again, people have told me it's a cop out, but my favorite bet, especially for new fans, is a $2 exacta box. Will cost you $4. You have to pick 2 horses, and they can run first or second in any combination, in either order.
And that's, because of the box. So in an exacta, you have to pick the horses
Straight.
as they finish
Yes.
first and second, but in an exacta box, you have them both ways,
You do,
essentially.
and that's the beauty of the box, and that is, even though it doubles your investment, you it's the safer play. And one of the other fun things about your exactas, your trifectas, your superfectas, that's first 2 across the wire, first 3, first 4, because we couldn't just name things easily in horse racing, is uh, even though an exacta is 2, a tri is 3, and a super is 4, you can actually use more horses in that. One of the best wagers, I think, for newer folks when you're starting to branch out into those exotics, once you feel comfortable picking 2 horses, try and stretch out to 4. But personally, I like the super. I like doing a what is a minimum of 10 cents. The 10-cent superfecta box, and I will actually use 5 horses. Not always. Sometimes I only like 4. But if I like 5 horses, but I'm not entirely sure how I think they're going to run, I will actually use 5. With a super, you're not with pardon me, with a try, you're not married to only using 3 horses. If you like 3, but you're not entirely sure what they're gonna do, play an exacta with 3 horses. Why not? Play a try with 4. It will add to your investment every time because you are adding an entirely different set of combinations of and permutations about how those horses can cross the wire. But luckily, most racetracks have gone to cheap enough minimums that you don't have to invest hundreds of dollars in these more minor wagers.
One of the things that's so fascinating about horse race wagering is that, as I mentioned earlier, there's more factors in play. It's not just team versus team. There's jockeys, there's trainers, there's horses, there's weather conditions. There's a lot of different factors. In business, we often talk about backing a company. Are you backing the jockey or the horse, or in essence, the management team or the company and its products? is there a preference in horse race wagering? Is the trainers have really, I mean, look at this race right now. You got Bob Baffert, and he's, he can do no wrong, right? He's won 6 Kentucky Derbies, 7 Preaknesses, and 3 Belmont Stakes as a trainer. And then, of course, he has well, we'll talk about the horses later, but he's got a couple entries in this race. So there's trainers that matters, jockeys that matter, but what about the horse itself? How can you rank them, or is it a tapestry of those factors?
It definitely is an amalgamation, and it is the fun part about this because if horses were machines, it would be really easy to say, oh, a machine is going to perform this way on this date, minus something crazy going on where we got to bring in maintenance crew. A machine performs the same day in and day out. Horses do not. And some horses like certain weather. Some horses like certain racetracks more than others. It's the composition of the track. Sometimes it's just it's a myriad of factors. A horse could have a bad day. We've seen over the years, horses accidentally step on pins in stalls and have to scratch. What was it last year when was it Thousand Words flipped over in the paddock because something spooked him, and it was for safety's sake. He wound up being a late scratch. Horses do not perform the way you think they're going to every single time. Now, that said, we do have trends. Uh, you know, we do have past performances that we can point to and try and guess. And that's the fun of the puzzle of trying to guess how a horse will perform this go round based on what they did prior, kind of in a way, same way you would with a stock in some ways. But you also have the added human element of jockey, of trainer, and some jockey and trainer combinations are easier to point to than others. But I think the other
Well, like Velasquez and Baffert, basically. Would that be an
for
example?
many, many, many years, it was always Todd Pletcher and Johnny V. The other really important thing to remember about horse racing, and I always, we talk about the human angle on it. Um, I take issue with anybody that wants to tell me jockeys are not athletes or not some of the best athletes in the world. One of the other angles about horse racing is literally racing luck. And these guys are 110 pounds, balancing on their tippy toes, riding 1,200-pound animals, going 45 miles an hour around hairpin turns and trying to get to a finish line first. And as we saw with maximum security, as we've seen with the Jeff Ruby Stakes, even on this year's Derby Trail, races are not always run clean. And as D. Wayne Lucas is famous for saying, it's not the best horse that wins the Kentucky Derby every year. It's the best horse in that moment, in those conditions, with the way that race ran. And that for us as handicappers, as people watching, as just fans of the sport, that's the part you gotta figure out is who's the best horse at 6:35 on Saturday.
Well, we're going to hold you to that because we're going to ask you a little bit earlier, about 1 week earlier. In a moment, we're going to bring on Noel, and he's going to walk through the field a little bit and invite you back to join us with Noel to go over your picks. And we're going to take a quick break and be right back. Well, we're back on the prediction trade. This is Jeff Joseph, and we've just heard from Molly Jo Rosen, walking through a little bit of history on how to look at betting and how to manage your bets. But we're going to bring her back in a moment to join Noel, our next guest, and walk through her picks for the Kentucky Derby. But now we have Noel Michaels with us. Noel, are you out there?
I'm here, Jeff, and I'm just thrilled to be talking about this year's Derby field just because, I share Molly Joe's enthusiasm for these big race days. And, the Derby is something that's like no other, really. You mentioned the 20-horse field, and, these are young horses. They're all 3-year-olds, really just beginning their careers in many cases. And, the we have so many great big races in horse racing. But the unique thing about the Kentucky Derby is that for these horses, up until now in their lifetimes and in their careers, they've been pointed for this one day, for this one race. And, so many things happen throughout these horses' careers, but up until now, it's all been about making it to this one day, this one race. And that to me is the thrilling aspect of the Kentucky Derby.
Well, it's indeed thrilling. And as you mentioned, these are all 3-year-olds running. It's a 1.25 mile track at Churchill Downs. The current purse for the Derby is about $3 million, with the winner taking home 1.86 million, 600,000 for second place, 300,000 for third place, 150,000 for fourth place, and there's I believe it's about 90 or 80,000 in the next spot as well. So a lot of money on the line. It's it's an exciting day. I'm actually excited to have you join us. I've heard your voice as a fan of Arlington Park outside of Chicago. I've been to that track many times, even growing up through the years, and then more recently again over the last 10 years. And I know your voice. You're the person that's calling the horses, not the race itself, but between the race, the kind of commentary introducing the horses as they're walking around the track. And that's, I think, what we really wanted you to do now. Of course, you're going to join Molly Jo at the end of this and actually share your picks, your top 4 or 5 horses for the Derby and how you would bet them. But we were hoping that you could kind of run through the card, the top horses. And I wanted to start with a question, which I know a lot of people don't understand, which is, how do horses end up at the Derby? There's a point system, but could you tell us a little bit about how that works, how points are assigned in the qualifying races, and how we end up with the 20 horses that represent the final card?
Sure. Well, I mean, the point system is basically a formality. It's attached to the prep races that these horses are running during the season up until now, and even late last season when they're still 2-year-olds. So, because as I just mentioned before, is that really this is a culmination of all these horses being pointed for this one day. These are the 20 horses who have made it into the starting gate based on these points. Really, the points are just a reflection of how the horses did in the prep races. So when we talk about prep races, we're just saying, these are races that are run throughout the winter and spring for these conditions, for 3-year-old males. And they continually whittle down. You start in January, let's say, with a ginormous group of hopefuls at that point, and they're being put through the paces, through their races leading up to the Derby. And as they go along, the distances are getting longer, the competition is getting tougher, and these horses are dropping out of contention. You have not new horses who are joining contention based on their performances in these meaningful races leading up to the Derby that continue to narrow down the contenders.
Well, if you can begin to walk through the card with us, we'd appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of talk about the number 1 horse in terms of the point count. I think he's at about 140 points right now, and that's Essential Quality. All eyes are on this horse. Already year-to-date or lifetime earnings of over $2 million for this horse, which is double the next Hot Rod Charlie, which comes in the second slot. Why should Essential Quality be on top of this list right now?
Well, you're right. I mean, really, this year's Derby field is all about essential quality. And if you're a bettor, or if you're working out odds or probabilities, these kind of things, you are for or against essential quality in this race, because he's the strong favorite, deservedly so. But along with being the strong favorite and the most likely winner of the race, come low odds. So this is the thing that handicappers and horse players, or just once a year bettors, have to weigh when they make their bets. Essential Quality, he's going to be the favorite. A lot of times we're coming up to the Derby, and we have horses coming from different parts of the country. Horses that came from the Southern California route, New York, horses from Florida coming up. And, you have the best of all of these, and they jumble, all together for the first time ever, really, in the Kentucky Derby. And it makes a great puzzle, like who's the best of the best. This year, you do have an element of that, of course, but The difference this year in the Derby is that you have one horse who's above everyone else on paper, and everybody else is kind of in that jumble below him. And the horse that really stands above everybody on paper so far is Essential Quality. He's an unbeaten horse with a long resume, if you will. Considering these are still young horses, I mean, Essential Quality was the 2-year-old champion of last year. He won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which is kind of like the championship race. He won the 2-year-old championship on the strength of that and other wins. And then he came out this year. He's only had 2 prep races, but he did what he had to do in those prep races, including a win last time out in the Bluegrass Stakes. He has the Eclipse Award winning trainer, Brad Cox. The Eclipse Award, essentially, the Oscars of horse racing. He was considered the top trainer of 2020. Then you have Luis Syez. Very briefly before, when you were talking, somebody mentioned Maximum Security. There's a little bit of a subtext going on in as far as a jockey story in this year's Derby. The rider of Essential Quality, Luis Syez, he was in my mind anyway, victimized in 2019 aboard the winner of the Kentucky Derby, Maximum Security, who was a disqualification. That's a long story. We don't want to even get into that, but Luis Syez has a great chance at retribution aboard this horse. And Essential Quality, he seems like the real deal. But if you are a bettor here, you really have to make that choice. Are you going to go with the most likely winner at the lowest odds, or are you going to go look for better odds somewhere else? And if you are one of the people who are going to look for better odds somewhere else amongst the other horses in this race, you could say that Essential Quality's last race was not perhaps his best. These things are so debatable in horse racing, but he really had to grind out a win in his last race. And I think a lot of people watching that last race expected better, maybe just because he has to live up to his own past performances, which is difficult to do with a horse that's never lost. But he did have to grind it out last time. I think it opens the door for an upset.
Well, before we go too far down that path and look at the rest of the field, there's a couple things that you mentioned that I want to refer to. One of them for our audience, which is kind of probability focused, we're kind of probability nerds, essentially looking at the numbers. It's important to recognize that historically, and also at the Kentucky Derby, the winner, or let's say the favorite in Derby history, has won 56 times in the 150 or 147 runnings of the Kentucky Derby. And that corresponds very well with what is considered to be the historical average of the favorite in any horse race winning, which is about 1/3 of the time. So that's just generally the odds in horse racing. The favorite's going to win 1/3 of the time. And because of that, of course, is going to have a much lower payout. So the opportunity is with longer odd horses to have a higher payout, or what you might pick up on the gimmick bets to maximize a return. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention, but I can't let you pass because obviously it's a long story and we'll keep it short. But in 2019, that was the first time in Derby history that the horse that crossed the finish line first and win. That was the horse or the year that Maximum Security, who you mentioned, was disqualified for impeding another horse, resulting in the second place finisher, Country House, which was a long odds horse, like 70-1, as I recall, right? It was way out there, moved up to the winner's circle. I thought that was, I was amazed by that ruling. And I'm curious, and not being inside the horse racing rule, what was the general consensus, or is that a very debated outcome? Was that fair? Was that the right thing to do?
Well, if you asked, as far as what I can tell, it's about 50-50. There's no consensus. But when you ask individuals, you'll get strong opinions from them. And but there's so much gray area, because if you held a gun to my head and you said, did Maximum Security bother horses in that race? I would say yes, he did. Did it deserve a disqualification, and was justice done by that decision? I say no. The weird thing about it is when you're running race 3 at Arlington Park on a Wednesday, it's a disqualification. To me, in the Kentucky Derby, it's not a disqualification. And other people will argue there's no difference. There's no difference between race 3 at Arlington Park on a Wednesday or the Kentucky Derby, the pinnacle of the sport. I disagree. Maximum Security was the best horse in that race. The horses that he bothered, perhaps in that race, were not going to win anyway. And the horse who was declared the winner of that race, the second place horse, very notably to me, was not amongst the horses bothered. So here you had the best horse. You had the best horse that day winning the race. Another horse who ran well, good effort, but not the winner. Declared the winner, and he was not bothered. Other horses were bothered. So on that day, they stuck to the rule of the law, and that lasted about an hour until they made their decision. But we've had hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of debate in the sport, pundits or whatever, as to whether or not that should have taken place.
Well, for what it's worth, that took the most exciting 2 minutes in sports and turned it into the most exciting hour. I think waiting for that outcome was quite a memory, as I recall. But so we've talked about essential quality being the favorite, and of course being a Cox horse, which matters. But there's a lot of trainer class that we talked about. Pletcher has 4 horses in the. Another great trainer, right, is Pletcher. He has 4 horses entered in this race. He's 2 for 55 in Kentucky Derby history. He had winners in 2010 with Super Saver and Always Dreaming in 2017. So could you walk through his horses in the race, and who do you think looks best right now? Or just, who's on top and why?
Right. So, yeah, you mentioned before Bob Baffert, who's a little thin this year that as far as what his contenders are. So this perhaps will be a year Bob Baffert does not win the Derby. And as you're talking about now, Todd Pletcher, one of the other premier trainers in the sport, has 4 horses going in here, including 2 horses who finished first and second in the Wood Memorial, which is one of those main prep races that we talk about. They were both long shots there, and I don't think the Wood Memorial was perhaps the best quality field leading up to the Derby, so I'm not really looking at those horses. But Todd Pletcher has 2 interesting horses, I think. Known Agenda, who is one of the prime top contenders of the race, in my opinion. He won the Florida Derby coming up to the Kentucky Derby. The Florida Derby is always one of the main routes to Kentucky Derby success. He beat a horse in that race who was a heavy favorite, and so Known Agenda we talk. Me and Molly Jo will talk about this more, but it's so important when you're looking at 3-year-old horses in the spring. Of what their form is, who's getting good at the right time. Oftentimes, the Kentucky Derby comes down to who got good at the right time. And I think there's a lot of people who can make a strong case that maybe in this year's field, it's going to be Known Agenda. And I wouldn't argue with that. Also, Sainthood is another of the Todd Pletcher horses. Sainthood lost. He lost on a synthetic track last time at Turfway in the Jeff Ruby Stakes, but he had an excuse. He had a brutal trip in that race, and you could make a lot of case at a good price that Sainthood will be a good factor in the Derby as well.
Well, of course, we mentioned Bob Baffert as well, let's see, who does Baffert have in this year?
Baffert has Medina Spirit, or Medina Spirit, I'm not sure, who was beaten in the Santa Anita Derby as the favorite. And, my problem with Medina Spirit is that he kind of looked a lot better to me going into his final tune-up prep race that he did coming out of it, and there's no doubt that a horse that's trained by Baffert is going to get a lot of attention, and to me as a bettor, when you're looking for probabilities and what their odds are, this horse's odds will be lower than his actual probability to win the race, in my opinion. In other words, people are going to bet a horse like Medina Spirit because he's trained by Baffert, and he will be in underlay, which means you're not getting enough odds for what you should be getting on what the horse's chances are actually in the race.
Right, and we're talking about Bob Baffert, the trainer, who is tied with trainer Ben Jones for the all-time winners and victories in the Kentucky Derby. He had 2 recent Triple Crown winners in American Pharoah in 2015 and, of course, Justify in 2018. So definitely a trainer that everyone keeps their eyes on. And ultimately, when you're looking at a favorite like Essential Quality, one of the things to look at is how he's run against other low odds or short odd horses that are in the same race. Is there a history there? Is Essential Quality been in races with Hot Rod Charlie and Superstock and Like the King and Known Agenda? Has he run against them all?
Some of them yes, and some of them no. And but the one thing about Essential Quality is he's danced every dance, and he keeps beating everyone they throw out there in front of him. One interesting thing to mention is Hot Rod Charlie. Now, Hot Rod Charlie could be the second favorite of this race. He'll be somewhere in amongst the next, second, third, fourth, fifth favorite at post time. And Hot Rod Charlie lost to Essential Quality in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He was second, though. And at that point in his career, Hot Rod Charlie was a gigantic long shot that day. And he's come out as a 3-year-old this year. He did have a fourth place finish out west in a very tough prep race earlier in the season. But then he came out to Louisiana, to the fairgrounds, and he won the Louisiana Derby. And in that race, Hot Rod Charlie beat several of these horses that we're going to see. He beat Midnight Bourbon, he beat Obesos, he beat Mandaloon, who Mandaloon had just won his last race in the Risen Star Stakes. So Hot Rod Charlie is a horse that kind of, flashed onto the scene late last year as a long shot. And now he's proven against some good horses this year that he's the real deal. He's coming into the race off a win, and in my mind, he'll be the top contender. But so many cases can be made out of who is the actual top contender in the race. The horse that won the last prep race in Southern California, Rock Your World, the winner of the Santa Anita Derby for John Sadler, a great case could be made for that horse being the top challenger for Essential Quality. So really, that's what I touched on before was that, this is an interesting kind of jumble this year because you have one horse that seems to be on top of everyone else and then a jumble underneath there amongst who might be, the best upsetter or group of horses you might consider as the upset chance in the race. And so Essential Quality, he's danced every dance. He's beaten everybody. Not everyone who's in this field, obviously, yet, but no reason to think that he wouldn't.
All right. Well, thank you, Noel. We're going to take a quick break right now. And when we return, we're going to bring Molly Joe to join you. And we're going to walk you up to the ticket window and see how you're placing your bets. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability. Named Best New Magazine of 2019 and 2020. Luckbox is the must-read magazine of active investors, big thinkers, side hustlers, entrepreneurs, gamblers, data geeks, and risk takers. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Visit getluckbox.com/TPT to receive the award-winning Luckbox in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox. Learn more at getluckbox.com/TPT.
Well, welcome back to the Prediction Trade. We're excited to have both Jo Rosen and Noel Michaels with us. They're going to handicap the Kentucky Derby. We've been talking a little bit about how to bet big races and a little bit about the running down the field of the 20 horses that will be running. Of course, this is recorded on Friday, and the draw won't occur until Tuesday at 1:00. That's when we determine what positions the horses are running in. So we've asked our two guests to share any change of opinions they might have or anything that they might want to add to their handicapping. As soon as we do know the post positions, we'll post it on our Twitter account for you to follow up on. But welcome back, Molly Jo and Noel. You're both on the line. I understand that you two know each other, know of each other, but have never met before. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, it's I've read and seen Molly Jo all around for years. She has a good social media presence and so on and so forth. But somehow we've missed each other uh, on a one-on-one level so far.
The beautiful thing about horse racing, and it's true on the backstretch and on the front stretch and in the broadcast booth and on handicapping panels, is it's a really, really, really small world. And even though we all sort of speak the same language, and we all, when you're a lifer like Noel and I are, we speak the same language. We know enough of the same people that it feels like I've known him forever, and it's a pleasure to get to spend some time batting around ideas with him.
Well, look forward to taking you up to the betting window right now, and let's do it this way for a little bit of structure. And I'm sorry we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but let's say $100 are in play, and that way
Hmm.
our listeners can multiply that any way they want to, by 10 or by 20 or divide it by 10 if they wish to. But how you'll best wager your $100. Again, there's a couple of things to be clear of. The day that we're recording now is before the draw, which is on Tuesday. There's two other factors that we aren't certain of. One of them, of course, is weather conditions. So I hope you can kind of throw that in a little bit too and give us perspective on mutters. The amazing thing about the Kentucky Derby, my understanding is it has never once in its history been canceled for an inclement weather. Under 147 runnings, they've all gone down regardless of the weather on race day. So weather is obviously potentially a factor. There's a position as well, and then of course there's the odds. What they're actually going off at, which ultimately you don't know. Just so odds in horse racing is determined by something called Paramutual Wagering. That's the formula. And just to give the listeners who don't understand how that works, just a simple example of that. Let's say there were three horses running in a race, and that there are three bettors at the track that are going to bet that race, and each one of those three bettors wants to bet on a different horse. And one bets 50 on the one horse. Uh, Better number two bets 25 on the number two horse, and better number three bets $25 on the number three horse. $100 has been wagered in total. That becomes the pool that's divided, that goes to the winner. And if those are the only three bets, win bets and nothing else, to make our example real simple, the one person who bet 50 is essentially going to get 1-to-1 odds, because if he wins, he's going to win the entire pool of $100. He put down 50, he'll get 100 back. That's 1-to-1 odds. In other words, his $2 bet will bet $4. That's the payoff at 1-to-1. And for bettors number two and three, betting on horses number two and three, respectively, their $25 bets will yield a $100 return, or a $75 return, but $100 back. So that's the equivalent of a 3-to-1 bet, where they're betting $2 and they get $8 back. So that's how parimutuel betting works. It means the actual money bet on race day determines the payouts. So we don't know that today, of course, but we have a very rough idea what horses are going to be the favorite, what kind of odds are going to look like. And those three factors are the unknowns at this point of this conversation. But we know the trainers, we know their and of course their workout histories. We'll throw that into. That's another, as Molly Jo. Well, Molly Jo, why don't you tell us about that? How important are the workouts going to be this weekend? What do you think about
Well,
that?
the interesting thing, and this is where you can tell that I bring the clocker mentality to all of this, is horses will work out, and these horses have been working out since very early in their 2-year-old year, and now obviously we're a year and a half after that. um, every horse that you see on a racetrack, derby or otherwise, works pretty much every single week. Some trainers do some things differently, but pretty stock standard is you'll see it at the bottom of their past performance, each horse's past performance line. You'll see a weird list of numbers and symbols, and that is a workout line. And you can read into patterns and things like that. Typically, what will happen is a horse will gallop every single day or jog, and then once a week we send them out for arguably race, arguably race speed, where you'll and it depends on distance, and you want to see a horse have, get progressively faster. One thing about big races like the Derby is you don't want to see anything crazy happen this weekend. You don't want to see a horse jump out and work lightning fast, because most likely he will have burned through most of his energy that he would have he would have had saved up for the big race. Sometimes you'll see trainers want to do longer, slower work. Sometimes you'll see them, like Helium came out of the gate just this past week. As a reminder, given that he's been off for a while, Mark Cassidy did a really cool thing, pitted him against an older stakes horse and then put him out of the gate to remind him what that is like. He also had Julian Leparoux on him for, I believe, the first time, which was a very cool thing. Julian gets a feel for the horse, and the horse gets a feel for Julian. So there are a lot of things that go into a workout pattern, and it takes a lot of brains on the trainer's part. Also, every trainer is different. Horses in Southern California will work faster typically than horses from back east. You have to know your trainers before you just put them numbers side by or circuits before you put them side by side. But you don't want to see anything super crazy or super slow this week. You want to just see maintenance because these horses are fit enough. They should be by now. These horses are fit enough. You just want to see them stay the course. If a horse does something out of the pattern or out of the norm, that's when it starts to be a cause for concern. And plenty of horses, in my opinion, have lost the Derby a week before.
Noel, speaking to speed, do we have that kind of speed out there in this race? So, for example, only 3 horses in history have ever cracked the 2-minute time on this 1.25 mile race. Of course, that's Secretariat in 1973 at 1:59:40, and then I believe it was Monarchos in 2001 and Northern Dancer much earlier. Is there any opportunity for somebody coming in at that speed today, or will they follow Molly Joe's reasoning of taking it a little bit more carefully?
So much, just when you're talking about just the raw clocking of the race, it's so much of that is the track condition that day, which we won't know until that day. On that day when Monarchos in 2002, I believe, won the Derby, that was a super souped up racetrack where there was like 3 track records broken earlier in the card. So you learn that, how the track is playing by watching those earlier races that day. We won't know that until that day. Oftentimes they do speed up the track, quote unquote, for these big race days. But one thing that's really relevant towards handicapping the race when you're talking about timing is the pace of the race. And this is one thing we haven't touched on at all yet because we're talking about so many, in a horse race, there's a million variables. But one of the key ones is pace. And it's going to play, it always plays a key role, but it's going to play a key role this year, I think, because Essential Quality, even though he could stay closer up in a paceless race like he did last time out, he was forced to do it last time out in the Bluegrass. In the Derby, there's never a lack of pace. I mean, they're going further than they've ever gone, 1.25 miles. The pace always ends up too fast. Occasionally, the horse will go all the way. It's not out of the question. But we have a lot of horses in this race. Well, maybe not a lot, but definitely 3 that are going to ensure a good enough pace for a horse like Essential Quality to lay back and do what he wants to do, which is make a late run and win from off the pace. So, when you're talking about who are going to be the early leaders of the race, Rock Your World, definitely, the horse coming out of the Santa Anita Derby win, he'll be up there. Steve Asmussen's horse, Midnight Bourbon, will be there. And here's a very interesting one, Caddo River. Now, Caddo River, I don't think has a chance to win this race at all. But he's trained by Brad Cox. And Brad Cox is the trainer of Essential Quality. So anyone who thinks there's going to be lackluster pace in this race, well, you just have to look at Caddo River being entered. He's one of the no chancers. If you're just looking for a horse that's going to win or even hold on for a piece of the money, Caddo River has no chance. There's about 6 horses in the race that have no chance. Caddo River is one of them, but Caddo River is going to play a
Well,
key
let's
role.
hear the rest of your field and cross those horses out. The rest of your no chance horses.
Okay, well, I should preface this by saying anything can happen in horse racing, and in the last 20 years, one of my absolute no chancers did win the race. A horse called Mind That Bird. I don't know, about 15 years ago. But anyway, if you're looking for horses that really, if you're going to bet the race, just leave them out. And this is not a knock against these horses. Just, this is the Kentucky Derby. They're probably not going to win. A horse like Dream Shake, a horse like Get Her Number, Caddo River, who I mentioned. And then I have more controversial horses, I think, that I'm throwing out too. A
Well,
horse like
before we do that,
Superstar.
Molly Joe, do you agree with those horses so
I am
far?
100% on board with a couple of horses whose names I went, "Oh, that's right, they're in this field." Um, I have a Caddo River is one of those that has bugged me a little bit, and I did a lot of deep dive race replay watching the last little bit. Caddo River and Medina Spirit, I will be very curious to see what the tactic with both of them are, and I put them kind of in the same boat almost with Noel as the level of chance they have to win the race. Do I think a horse like Caddo River may surprise us and hang on for a small piece of if you're going to play some of those crazier, fun wagers, like, if they still do the 5, 6, going back down the field. Um, the problem is they push this horse, and they did this earlier with Medina Spirit in his career. They have pushed him to quarter horse out of the gate. They want him on the lead. And I don't know, yes, it was obvious with the Smarty Jones race earlier in the year, that but then they started that was the only way he could win. But then with the Rebel and the Arc Derby, I wish they would have just let him settle. There is a chance that this is not a spit the bit if he doesn't get the lead horse, and they haven't given him that shot. Caddo River is a horse that when we start talking the later races in the season, I would love to revisit because I think the talent is there, but I worry that it's a tactic issue with him more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I'm touching on now. Is I have nothing against Caddo River as a horse, and he'll be good, but I just think they have to send him, and that's going to be a disaster for him in the Derby.
All right, you're both being walked up to the betting booth, and you have to pick one win horse. I'm curious,
Oh
what's
god.
your number one pick from each of you?
I have a thing. Doug Bradar, who was the racing secretary at Churchill Downs for a bunch of years, and he's now actually Florent Giroux's agent, and Flo is riding this race. Once explained to me about precocity and development on horses in a way that nobody has ever put it together had ever at that time put it together for me before. That and I'll use essential quality in this case. His margins of victory have been getting progressively smaller. So the question is he's not any less talented, we know that, but, can he do this on sheer ability, or are the other horses finally maturing at a rate that's gonna equal or surpass essential quality? The essential quality reminds me a lot of a horse of California Chrome a few years ago, and I remember going into that Derby saying, "It's Chrome or no, it's Chrome or it's gonna be some random mind that bird type horse. It's gonna be a really weird year." And, it's either gonna be it's gonna be super obvious or really weird. I don't get that vibe this year as much. Essential quality is super talented. Um, I think he's vulnerable. I think a horse like Highly Motivated, who is progressing and growing up and maturing rapidly and doing everything right and really, I don't know that Chad Brown gets his Derby, but when a horse like Highly Motivated put essential quality to the test, we saw that essential quality may not be the same horse. I am willing to look elsewhere. I have some issues with Known Agenda, who I think is a very, very, very talented horse. I have a question about whether or not he can corner and if he's going to pull a max sec, what Maximum Security did at the quarter pole. Because when you watch his workouts and you watch what he did in the Florida Derby, he takes the same sideways step at exactly the same spot, different tracks. But the point is, it's exactly the same move at exactly the same spot. And it bugs me because if he does it in this race, in 20 horses, what's gonna happen? Um,
I don't think the Derby can handle 2 DQs in 3 years.
I don't think my blood pressure could, and my poor therapist isn't paid enough to handle that much of a discussion. I really do think a horse like Highly Motivated needs a longer look than people will give him, and if y'all don't want to, especially because 'cause we're talking about betting, if y'all wanna let that horse go off at a decent price, I'm hoping 10-ish to 1, feel free because he's going to get a lot of my money. I think underneath there's a lot of discussion to be had about a horse like Sainthood. There's a couple of others, Soup and Sandwich, who was runner up in the Florida Derby. Soup and Sandwich's race in the Florida Derby was exceptional. He just got outrun by a better horse that day, and that's horse racing. And I will say this: Obesos is the commanding curve of this year. The fact that it's the same owners is hilarious. But when you watch what Obesos did in the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby, all of a sudden you're like, oh, where'd he come from? Hello, as a runner up and is in the money. So throw Obesos out at your own peril, but that horse will be flying late.
Well, Noel Obesos is right at the bottom, like ranked 19th out of the top 20 in terms of the qualifying points. What's your opinion on that horse?
Obesos is going to be coming late, and it's just a matter of whether or not it's going to be too late. And I could see either one of those. This is not a horse I want to win, but if we have a massive pace meltdown in the race, that's going to be one of the horses who's running through the stretch. But just getting back to your what you were talking about before, if you had $100 to bet in this race, how would I do it? Uh, Essential Quality to me is the horse to beat, but he's going to be 2 to 1 in a 20 horse field with a lot of random things that happen in the Derby and everything. And I would use Essential Quality obviously in all of my bets, like exactas, trifectas, and those kind of things when you're picking the top 3 finishers, top 2 finishers. But if I'm just going to make a win bet, I wouldn't bet Essential Quality just because 2 to 1 is just too low. I think especially when you can make a case like Molly Joe that he's not getting better. He was better, and maybe the rest of these horses are catching up to him a little bit.
Okay, so that makes sense at Essential Quality, and I'm sure Molly Joe, do you agree that Essential Quality is in every exacta Quinella trifecta bet? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. If the only thing I will say is, am I crazy enough to have probably a couple of super ridiculous, hopeful bets leaving him off? Yes, because there is always that one or two tickets that you do the if everything falls apart and this thing runs completely different to how I expect ticket, then yeah. But you have to. I mean, you have to use him. You have to.
So that being the case, no, we'll go back to where you were going. So, and that makes sense. You're managing money. You're trying to get the maximum payout, and you're not going to get too much on a win bet on Essential Quality going off as the chalk, perhaps, or certainly the favorite. So, where are the other win bets you're willing to place?
Well, I think in my top group, it would have to be one of Hot Rod Charlie, Highly Motivated, who Molly Joe spoke highly of, Rock Your World, and Known Agenda. I mean, that's those are the jumble amongst the quote unquote next best, next most likely winners. And the great thing about the Kentucky Derby, unique race, 20 horses. You get great odds on horses that have great chances to win. There's not that many races throughout the course of the year where you can say that. And these are horses that are going to be in the 5 to 10 to 1 to win range. And if you cash a $20 win bet on any one of these horses, I mean it's
You'll pay
fantastic.
for all your losers. That's right. So, Molly Joe, the short list from Noel is Hot Rod Charlie, Highly Motivated, Rock Your World, and Known Agenda. Which of those would you be placing win bets on?
Definitely highly motivated. That horse, but for getting a little bit tired in the lane of the bluegrass, which you could tell with the late lead switch and then the wrong lead switch and then right back to right. He gave Essential Quality all he could handle, and I think the race prior to that was at the Gotham. Was just there was that race was run a little weird at the beginning, and I don't think that he was. I think with a little bit more ground, he would have had that race actually. Highly Motivated to me is extremely live. Hot Rod Charlie, extremely live. What that horse did in the Louisiana Derby is everything you want a wire to wire win to look like. I love how he finished that final 16th. He was, to quote Vic Stauffer, straight and strong. And that horse, I saw an Ernie Belmonte photo from him galloping yesterday, I believe it was, at here at Santa Anita. And oh my God, that horse looks good. I get the love for Known Agenda, love what he did in the Florida Derby, think he's very live. He, to me, is a horse that when we talk about races like the Belmont, some of those later handicapped older horse division kind of races in New York over the summer and fall. Yes, I do believe Known Agenda is your Jockey Club Gold Cup winner for this year if we're going to go crazy. I'm not as big about Rock Your World um, as everybody else is. I do think he's getting right at the right time, which is important, obviously. Um, and I know that John Sadler has found a lot of success with shipping horses to Churchill. He had a filly named Switch who ran amazing in a Breeders' Cup race there. One of my favorite bets that I've ever cashed a couple years ago. And the Sadler to Churchill angle is very, very, very interesting. And the horse I give a lot of love to Helium. That horse has been managed weirdly. It's the owner call, not the trainer's call. You can tell by just some of the things that have happened. I think the horse has a lot of ability. Little again, like the way that Mark Casse has trained him. I think I mentioned that earlier with the gate work and Julian getting on board, et cetera, et cetera. Um, the horse that I keep coming back to, and I don't know what to do with because um, I love how he worked against Known Agenda last weekend, and knowing how Todd typically works his Derby horses, my eye kept going back to this horse and what happened in the Sainthood, what happened in the Jeff Ruby with the patient ride down the backstretch. The thing that I thought was really cool is the rider let him drop back pretty far down the backstretch. And the horse made this big, long, beautiful, sustained run, got flat out stopped at the eighth pole by when Like the King got bumped because Like the King got bumped. And Sainthood kept coming on, and he got stronger inside the 16th pole. Do I think Sainthood wins the Kentucky Derby? No. But do I think he's going to be a big price and is going to run better than better than most people expect? Yeah, Sainthood is I think we always talk about the wise guy horse. I think Hidden Stash is going to be kind of the wise guy horse about, he's danced every dance and he's run every race and he's been everywhere and, he's done everything he can. I think Sainthood is going to be the better long shot wise guy play. But once again, like I said, with Highly Motivated, if folks want to leave him alone on the tote board, that's totally fine because I have some money to be made here.
And Melly Joe, if given a choice of which horse ends up in in your, let's say, a boxing 5 superfecta, is it going to be Soup and Sandwich or Obesos?
Oh, oh, oh. I thought you were going to go somewhere else, which is why I was like, oh. If I'm picking 5, Highly Motivated, Essential Quality, Sainthood, Obesos, Hot Rod Charlie.
So Obesos. So Soup and
But I
Sandwich
love
doesn't make
Soup
it.
and
So
can I go 6? Can I do?
all right. Well, so here's the
Oh,
question.
It's
And
awfully expensive when you start going 6.
I want to make sure I have this right for your listeners in no particular order. Let's say you're boxing 5 horses on a superfecta, and superfecta, of course, being picking 4 horses as they finish in order. But boxing 5 means you're taking those 5 in any order. You would have Essential Quality, Hot Rod Charlie, Highly Motivated, Sainthood, and Obesos. Is that fair to say? Those are your 5?
I'm yes, and Soup and Sandwich is a nose away from being in that.
Soup and Sandwich and nose
And
outside.
I have something similar.
Well, I've got you. If I may, let's go through your list. I have Essential Quality, Hot Rod Charlie as well, Highly Motivated as well. Those are the 3 horses that you both share in your top 5. But you also have Rock Your World and Known Agenda.
Yeah, and granted, my 5 are chalkier than Molly Joe's 5. These are pretty obvious horses. If you held a gun to my head and say who's the most likely winner, Essential
Absolutely.
Quality. Who will I be Who will I be betting to win? I will be betting to win Hot Rod Charlie to win because I think he has a great shot. He'll be closer to like 8-1 in that kind of range. And uh, I just have a problem betting to win on a horse 2-1 in a 20 horse Kentucky Derby. So my win
Absolutely.
bet.
And highly motivated as well. You'll bet to
Well,
win?
and highly motivated, I would stick in my exotics along with Rock Your World, who among the pace horses, among the speed horses who will be out in front early, I feel like Rock Your World will have the best chance to go all the way and hang on. If he doesn't win, at least to get in there. Interestingly, Chad Brown talking about highly motivated, Chad Brown's the trainer of highly motivated. He indicated that he would not send highly motivated. They're going to ask him to come from off the pace, which I mean, not far off the pace, but they don't want him to get involved in a scrum for the lead. And to me, that is a positive. I don't want highly motivated battling up front all the way at a mile and a quarter because I don't think he can do it against these. But if they do try to rate him a little bit, I like that for highly motivated. So, I have Rock Your World, the best of the speed horses, good chance to win, even better chance to hold on for a spot in the exacta, trifecta, superfecta. I like Hot Rod Charlie. He'll be my win bet. And with these horses, you must put in essential quality in your exactas, trifectas, superfectas, and so forth, because he's just that good. And if he doesn't win, these horses lose. We all know that it's horse racing, but he'll be there somewhere. I think he has to be there somewhere.
Okay, so before we close this up, then let's talk about the factors that are still unknown right now. Just a quick answer to this from both of you, quick. If we have a wet track or a muddy track, is there any of your top five that moves to the head of the pack? Do we have any history with
We
essential
do
quality
actually,
in
and
mud
this was
at all?
something that I found pretty interesting, and it's typically one of the things that you look at when you talk about horses back east versus West Coast. Essential Quality won the Southwest, yes, on a very a very wet track. It was a very gray, overcast day in Hot Springs, Arkansas that day. So we know that he likes it. And I believe another race that he ran was not on the driest of tracks. But for the most part, that was the only prep race run over an actual, what you could call wet track. And it's one of the prettier Essential Quality wins on his 5 race resume. So if you're looking for that angle, yes, but that also means that 19 other horses we don't know what they do, and anything is possible.
And the second factor that we wanted to talk about before we break today would be the post position. As I said, we don't know the pole positions yet. They'll draw on Tuesday, but we've seen a trend over recent years where what used to be, if you were in that second gate of 15 to 20 horses outside of the first 1 through 14 slot, not only was there a little gap there between those two gates, which means you had to make up an even longer distance, but that was perceived to be a disadvantage for a long time. But in the last 10 years, a lot of horses from 10 and above have been, coming in first. So, in fact, if anything, as Noel was telling me offline, that being in the first, second, or third slot is now a tougher position. The history of the Kentucky Derby is pretty clear. The most winning post position is the number 5 slot. It's won more times in the 147 runnings than any other position. Number 9 and number 10 have a close second and third, and then number 15 is the fourth winningest pole position. When you're talking about the top 3 horses in the money, so in the money finishes by post position, the number 10 slot is number 1. So more horses coming in the number 10 slot have ended up in the money than any other slot in Kentucky Derby history. And then number 2, the 2 position starts showing up again, and the number 9 position as the second slot. So is there, and oddly enough, nobody has ever won in the 17th position in the history of the Derby. So anything to add? I know we're going to ask you to weigh in after the drawing, after the positions are drawn, and we'll update our listeners on Twitter as to if you've changed your thoughts as a result of that. But is there anything you want to add in with respect to the positions, and how will Essential Quality run against a rail, for example? Or do you think it looks better on the outside?
This is super, super important. I mean, we cannot, for me at least, I cannot underestimate this, because any of these horses that we're talking about, for me personally, if they draw post position number one, I'm not betting them. And not only am I not betting them to win, I'm not betting them anywhere. And the same thing goes to a lesser extent for 2 and 3. I don't want horses there either. Maybe they can get into trifecta, something like that. If a horse like Curlin could draw post 2 and manage to lose the Derby that year as much the best, 1, 2, or 3 will kill anybody in a 20 horse Derby. Now, when you go through, the stats that you're reading, that's all throughout history. All throughout history, there has not been 20 horse gates in the Kentucky Derby. Sometimes there's 10, 12, 8, this is the 20 horse era of the Kentucky Derby, which is like the last 20, 30 years. And in that span of time, these inside horses can't win.
To your point, the last winner from the first position was affirmed. No, I'm sorry, Ferdinand, back in 1986, right? That was the last post position number one winner,
Right.
and affirmed the second position, right?
And a lot of people like to throw out the outside, but Big Brown won, I think, from post 20, right? I'll have another one from post 19. You can win from the outside. It's not an advantage, but you can win from out there.
I remember when Big Brown drew post 20 and we all freaked out. But honestly, the thing that we learned that day, and it's true of outside or inside, doesn't matter. If the best horse on that day, and especially that horse towered over the rest of that field, the best horse is going to win regardless of post. Yes, some are more likely than others. Inside is harder than outside, but best horse will win on the day. Fingers crossed, hopefully, is the plan.
Well, Big Brown came back from the 20th gate in 2008 and beat the filly 8 bells by about 4 3/4 lengths at the end. That was an amazing, amazing race, an amazing finish. It's been really wonderful to have you both on, and I already know that Mike and I are going to ask you come Preakness or Belmont
Ooh.
Stakes for your insights again. So we hope we have you back on at some point. We are going to check in with you for your thoughts after the positions are drawn on Tuesday to see if it's impacted anything. Because as Noel and would you also agree, Molly Jo? Are you going to rule out any horse in the first, second, and would you extend third position to that, or is it just the first and second that you find most crowded out?
I don't love a horse that draws 1, 2, or 3. But for me, it's not as much of an automatic toss as it sounds like it is for Noel. In part because it's tactics based. If Bourbonic, who I don't like to win this, but if Bourbonic, who is a dead closer, draws the rail, I don't care, because that horse was never going to be anywhere near the lead anyway. So, that's something to kind of look at when you look at those inside posts, is if the jock is going to have to take back anyway, if it's a horse that doesn't want the lead or doesn't need the lead or doesn't need to be in that first flight, then it's probably not going to impact him as much as it would a horse who needs the lead, like a Rock Your World or a Medina Spirit or a Caddo River. So for me, it's a little bit more based on the horse. I don't love those inside posts, but it'll be. I'm very curious to see. This is a strange year in a good way. This is an interesting year, and be very curious to see how the posts and how the posts affect what it is we wind up seeing on the track on the first Saturday in May.
Well, we will come back and ask both of you. And just to conclude, we have a Noel's short list. We have Essential Quality, Hot Rod Charlie, and Highly Motivated. Those three horses are also on the short list from Molly Jo. Those Hot Rod Charlie, Highly Motivated, and Essential Quality, of course. Noel goes further with Rock Your World and adds Known Agenda to round out his 5. And Molly Jo adds Sainthood and Obezos to her list. So what's outstanding is weather, the weekend workouts, and the post draw on Tuesday. We're going to check back with you and post your thoughts on our Twitter account, share it with our listeners. Thank you both so much. It's really been great having you on. You guys are both active on Twitter, so you can follow Molly Jo at Molly Jo Rosen. And you can follow Noel at Noel Mail 1. That's NOELMAIL number 1. And they both have websites as well, mollyjorosen.com, or read Noel's latest articles at usracing.com. Great to have you both on. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
me.
so much. Looking forward to chatting in the future.
And I know you two are going to be talking offline together, so we'll let you at it. Thanks again. Well, Mike, where do we go from here?
I got to tell you, Jeff, I learned a lot on this episode. And sticking to the theme of races, big races especially, as I'm sure you know, May 30th, the Indy 500 is going to be taking place. So we're hoping that next week we're going to have a guest on who can speak to wagering on the Indy 500. It should be a pretty exciting episode.
Fantastic. I've been to that race. It's a lot of fun and know nothing about handicapping race car drivers. So hopefully we'll be taken back to school next week. Looking forward to it. And that's all we have for this episode of the Prediction Trade. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about us and make sure that you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And check out thepredictiontrade.com to sign up for the newsletter, find us on social media, or send us a message. And you can also find the Prediction Trade in print in each issue of Luckbox magazine. Go to getluckbox.com/TPT to read the latest issue of Luckbox digitally for free. So thanks for joining us today. This is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
And remember, always wager responsibly, believe in math, master your trade, and join us next time on the Prediction Trade.